we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, the Super Bowl, 'cause we're the...
And welcome to another edition of Fin Maniacs Live. We are here tonight to discuss a wide variety of topics, starting with Ryan Tannehill's contract extension, going down to OTAs, which start next week. And, of course, the big news is whether or not Ndamukong is going to show up or not. A lot of questions there. It doesn't really matter if he shows up, or is it just the media overblowing certain things. We are also going to talk about Dion Jordan with the news today coming out that from Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald that he is ignoring teammates, basically not responding to text messages and everything that's going on with that situation. I know he's kind of in the back of everyone's minds right now due to the fact that he is suspended from the team for an entire year. But we are going to dive into that. And in addition, we have some other things to talk about, some other things briefly, the 50th anniversary celebration, some film analysis we're doing on the website, and a lot more. So we hope you enjoy the show. If you're in our chat room, please feel free to make comments, type along. We will answer your questions, read your comments on the air here tonight during Fin Maniacs Live. I'm joined by Louis Sung, of course, and Chad Ronnebaum, and special guest tonight, Keith Beebe from the Finsider. So Keith, welcome to Fin Maniacs Live, and thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to get started right off with Ryan Tannehill and his contract extension. Of course, big news, because the Dolphins, for the first time in a very, very long time, actually the first time since Dan Marino, they are signing their quarterback to a second contract. And that is simply, amazing and sad at the same time, because you have your quarterbacks, you have this search for a franchise quarterback for so many years. I mean, just go through the names. Jay Fiedler, who was actually probably the best out of all of them before Tannehill. Cleo Lemon.
Chad Pennington.
Chad Pennington was great, but he was, there for 1 year. Cleo Lemon, John Beck, Gus Frerotte, A.J. Feely, Joey Harrington. Oh, my God, the names just awful, terrible. And then Chad Henne, the quarterbacks that we thought were giving us hope. They were going to become the next greatest thing since Dan Marino. We thought that they were going to be the franchise quarterback of the future, and then bam! After 2 years, 3 years, we realized that they are not the answer. But for Ryan Tannehill, it looks like it's going to be completely different as the Miami Dolphins signed him through a contract extension through 2020. He was originally signed through 2016, has a 4-year extension worth an additional $77.7 million overall. It will pay $96 million over the next 6 years, with about $21 or so million guaranteed at signing. The other guaranteed money is in case of injury. Per OverTheCap.com, Tannehill will become the highest paid quarterback in the NFL to never compete in a playoff game. The next closest quarterback, Sam Bradford, who earns $13 million per year. However, of course, Bradford's salary is because of the rookie pay system when he was drafted number 1 overall. The highest paid veteran to never play in a playoff game, who was not on the rookie wage scale, is Brian Hoyer, who makes just over $5.5 million per year. Some other interesting notes: Tannehill's contract will exceed Colin Kaepernick's by $250,000 per year and just under $10 million in full guarantees. Kaepernick, of course, appeared in a Super Bowl and 2 NFC championship games. It's clear, though, that because of this, the Dolphins' front office is putting their complete faith in Tannehill to be their quarterback for at least the next 5 years through 2020. Now, before the extension, he was scheduled to earn over $18 million this season and next. So basically, they're paying him an additional $6.7 million per year, and of course, frees up some cap space over the next several years. Over the course of Tannehill's 3-year career, he has started in all 48 games and has completed 1,029 of 1,662 passes for 11,252 yards, 63 touchdowns, and 42 interceptions. When running the ball, he has accumulated 760 yards on 145 attempts. He has 4 rushing touchdowns throughout his career. It is worth noting that his 92.8 quarterback rating was the 5th highest single-season number in Dolphins history. He also set other records as well. His 392 completions in 2014 set a franchise single-season record. His 27 touchdown passes were the 6th most in the season in franchise history. His 4,045 passing yards were the 7th highest in a single season in franchise history. His 66.4% completion percentage was the second highest in a single season and franchise history. Now, there are, of course, people who are saying that Tannehill doesn't deserve this extension. There are people saying that Tannehill is just another run-of-the-mill quarterback. There are people saying that he is not the quarterback of the future. There are people saying that the Dolphins are out of their minds. Of course, this is all from local media and other fans that don't really look at the full picture, don't look at the film, and just look at the numbers and look at other people's information that they're putting out there. There has not been one negative reaction from any national media members at all. If you go and we put a post up on the website, there is not one negative reaction from a national analyst in regards to his contract extension.
Well, there is one, Matt.
Was there one? I must have missed
Skip
that.
Bayless.
Okay, well, Skip Bayless. Of course it's Skip Bayless. He thought Brandon Weeder was going to be better than Ryan Tannehill. But all the negativity, whatever negativity is coming from, it's coming from the local media and the fans who aren't well educated, who just look at the ball, who look at Mike Wallace, who would just assume, well, Mike Wallace is fast. He got paid all this money. Why is he dropping the balls? Oh, it's Tannehill's fault. So there's a lot more to really go by, to really study what Tannehill is and what he's doing and whose fault it was there, whose fault it was here. There's so many issues that Tannehill has fought through over the past 3 years, and a lot of it is unfairly blamed on him, but he's the quarterback. So your reaction, guys. Chad, I don't know what you think of the move, the extension. Lewis, Keith, feel free to chime in after Chad as well.
I liked the move. I mean, I can see both points of view. I think they didn't have to pay him that money this year, but also the overall value of that contract relative to what that position pays. It wasn't like they grossly overpaid him or anything like that. So, I mean, I don't see a problem with it. To me, this was Miami looking at the quarterback situation around the league and saying, this is the guy that's going to be our quarterback. Let's just get him signed, because they're putting all the resources they can around him to succeed. They brought in all these skill players, and if he's going to succeed, the cost for him to do it a year from now would have been substantially. Like, you've been talking about, well, he got overpaid because he hasn't made the playoffs. Well, if he makes the playoffs, the amount more Miami would have had to pay him would be substantial. So I think they just kind of looked at it as they think he's going to be trending upward, and I don't see why they wouldn't think he would be. And so they decided to pay him that now versus pay him even more in a year or two from now. And I think you've seen some negative reaction. The Colts are an interesting one, because they set a floor. And so, it's kind of funny where they say, wow, if Ryan Tannehill gets that, what's Andrew Luck going to get? Well, exactly, because those quarterbacks like Andrew Luck and Russell Wilson have made playoff games and even Super Bowl, they're going to be going to those clubs and making them pay them even more, which will make them an even heavier cap burden. So I thought the move was just fine. Last year, in my opinion, I think it's a very realistic opinion, Ryan Tannehill played well enough to make the playoffs. He was a solid quarterback last year, and so I think they made the right move.
Go for it, Keith.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, good. It's the right move for a couple of reasons. Number one, whether people want to debate if he's a franchise quarterback or he's not a franchise quarterback, the numbers are there, which is something that I think a lot of people are overlooking. They look at it and they say the wins. I forget, is he 23 and 25? I forget the exact. I know that he's below 500 in terms of starts. Although you can make the case that 2 of those seasons he's with Mike Sherman. He's with a team that really wasn't very good at times. When he started in 2012, the receiver core was awful. Legadou Nane was supposed to be this incredible contributor. He was an incredible contributor for the other team, because I remember he would tip all these balls to him. So it's if you can get past the fact that he's below 500 in terms of career starts and wins, and you look at the numbers, you look at the completion percentage, you look at the yards. I know that a lot of people want to harp on the yards per attempt, because I think he's at something like six yards per attempt. I mean, it's low. But if you think he's trending upward, if you believe he's your franchise quarterback, and I think that there are a lot of Dolphins fans who believe that, and I think they're right to do so, then I think it's right to lock him up now. They locked him up for less than was initially expected, and they locked him up before they give him a chief receiving weapon in Devontae Parker, which I think could prove to be genius, because I think that guy is almost guaranteed to inflate Ryan Tannehill's numbers this season.
And I would have to agree with the both of you. What people are overlooking is that they're ignoring the idea that this is what the market is now for any kind of long-term quarterback. Even if you don't believe that he's a franchise guy, this is basically what quarterbacks are making these days. This is just what the market is. People keep in mind that Andy Dalton for the Bengals is making like $100 million over his contract. Kaepernick is making $100 million over his contract. Just the you look on the surface of the numbers, and obviously Tannehill's making a lot less than Kaepernick and Dalton and those guys. Now that's on the surface, of course. It's not just it's more. If you go deeper, it may say something different. But I don't know many people who would honestly say that they would prefer Andy Dalton over Ryan Tannehill. I don't know a whole lot of people who would honestly say that they would like Alex Smith over Ryan Tannehill. People look, and like you said, Keith, people look at his yards per attempt, and I honestly don't have a problem with him having a low yards per attempt because, like I keep trying to say, and it seems like nobody hears me a lot of the time, Tom Brady, for the past few years, has made a career out of short passes and just giving his receivers the chance to do the yards after the catch thing. I can't even remember how many times that Brady's had to throw the ball more than 10 yards because all he has to do is just throw it to somebody, and then they run halfway down the field. That's just the way that the Patriots' offense is run. And I go back to the Super Bowl numbers that I picked up. I counted all the throws. 40 out of 51 were less than 10 yards, and people are complaining that Ryan Tannehill has a low yards per attempt. Why?
Well, deflated footballs don't travel as far.
Well, this is true, yes, but that's true. But even if the balls were not deflated, like that's a moot point at the moment. The fact of the matter is Brady is awesome for doing the exact same thing that Ryan Tannehill is chewed out for constantly. Is like I understand the frustration. Tannehill's not good at the deep ball. I will readily admit that. I understand it. It's fine. That's why we brought in receivers who can help him do more. Mike Wallace is a weapon that you must be an accurate deep ball thrower or he's not going to do what you want him to do. I understand that. That's fine. Tannehill and Wallace didn't match. That's why we brought in Devontae Parker. That's why we brought in Greg Jennings. That's why we brought in Kenny Stills, because they all have that extra oomph in them that lets them fight for the football more than Mike Wallace ever did. So that's great. Now Tannehill's going to do better. He has better weapons. But I understand the deep ball frustrations, but if that's really all that you have now to go on is that he can't throw a deep ball and that's the reason he's not a franchise quarterback, then I'm sorry, you're just not looking at the big picture. You have to look at things from a more intelligent perspective. You have to look at what has his offensive line been? Has it been decent? Has it been at all worth? Could you even consider calling it an offensive line? I don't. I call it Swiss cheese. Andy Dalton has had a top offensive line for the past few years, and somehow still Tannehill plays better than he does. If you put Tannehill on the Cincinnati Bengals, I guarantee you they get past the first round of the playoffs instead of getting bumped out for the past 4 years. That really is my opinion. That's the way I feel about that. If you want to argue that Joe Flacco is a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill, well, then I guess you'd be saying that you prefer an aggressive quarterback as compared to Tannehill, who's more conservative. That's fine. That's your preference. It's not so much Tannehill's worse than Flacco. It's just that they play different types of football, and you prefer the more aggressive type. That's fine. I'm cool with that. Matthew Stafford does the same thing, and there are some people who actually say, I believe it was Mr. Omar Kelly, our good friend, that had finally admitted and he bowed down, in his words, to Dave Hyde, who finally convinced him that Tannehill is actually better than Matthew Stafford. But what's Stafford different than Tannehill? Stafford's more aggressive. He has Megatron to throw to. He has weapons that allow him to continue to be aggressive. That's just his play style. But if the problem is that Tannehill's too conservative and he can't throw a deep ball, that's the only issues that really are there, then I'm sorry. I don't feel like you have a really good argument as to why Tannehill doesn't deserve his money. He's done a lot for the team with what he's done, and the team surrounding him, at least certain parts of it, the most important parts, the receivers and stuff like that, they have failed him. The offensive line has failed him. His receivers have failed him. And I have never been a proponent of the idea that quarterback, that winning and losing and the QB rating are actually good stats. I have never been a proponent of that, and I never will be, just because there's just way too many factors to play in there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think if you're the Dolphins, you're banking on two things with this contract. Number one is you like the season he had last year. I think we can all, most of us agree, as long as you're not a hater looking for something wrong with this guy, that you like the way he played in 2014. So if you're the Dolphins and you like the season he had last year, you're banking on two things. Number one is the fact that you've brought in additional weapons this year, considerable upgrade at the position, and then you got Stills, you got Jennings, and then Devontae Parker puts you over the top. Number two is it's his first year in Bill Lazor's offense. So you're also banking on the fact that you think that he's going to continue to grow, mature, and develop as a quarterback in a system that you believe is suited to him, which I believe it is. I think a lot of people believe it is. So that's why I just don't have an issue with this contract, because they've done enough to help him develop. They've gone out and gotten landed weapons and drafted guys to help bring him further along. And when the contract came out, I loved it, because what was the original figure? 115 mil. People were expecting. Like, yeah, 115 mil. Instead, it's 96 essentially, if you're looking at it from a technical sense. So I mean, I love it. I think that they've done enough to get him to the next level. I think that there's incredible upside in his game that's yet to be tapped. You mentioned the difference between Tannehill and Andy Dalton. I couldn't agree more. I think Dalton had a real lack of upside coming out of TCU. I think he did some things well, but it's not like he's going to come out all of a sudden, be able to launch the ball downfield consistently, exhibit or display better arm strength and mobility, whereas we know that Ryan Tannehill is an incredibly mobile guy. They did a really good job of running the ball with him last year, and we bring in these guys with the increased catch radius, and maybe that whole deep ball thing isn't an issue next year, and we can just erase that whole argument from the record. But I mean, I like it. I think they did a good job. They signed him for far less than people suspected, and they've done enough to really get him to the next level. So they've lived up to the fact that they believe they have a franchise quarterback, and now they're getting him the weapons and the atmosphere, and the environment to make sure that he continues to play like one.
Yeah, Keith, you hit it right on the head. Just two final points I want to make with it is one, from a little further out perspective on the salary cap. Miami has signed Ndamukong, and so they brought Tannehill in, and like I said, what that does is, I love the fact people are saying, well, how can you pay him that when people like Andrew Luck and Russell Wilson have made playoff games and won playoff games? And I'm like, great, those guys they need to get paid more. You're absolutely right, because that pressures those teams now to really want to push the salary cap up, because if they have to pay Andrew Luck more than Ryan Tannehill, and the Seahawks have to pay Russell Wilson more than Ryan Tannehill, those teams are going to be getting hit by those big salaries, and so that makes them want to push the salary cap up, which just benefits the Dolphins, who want it pushed up as well, because they have some high cap guys. So I can definitely see that there. And then the timing of it, people have to understand that, yes, he has 2 years of his contract because they picked up an option, but that last year, it wasn't like he was playing affordably. He was going to get paid like somewhere between 14 to 16 million anyway on that option. And so this was the last window of opportunity where the Dolphins had any leverage with Ryan Tannehill, because they had him going under a low deal this year, so that he's at risk, if he gets a severe career-ending injury, he misses out on getting a bunch of money. So it makes sense for Ryan Tannehill to sign that deal now. If they wait until the end of the year, and in particular, if Tannehill has a year that's, even if he doesn't get better, if he's just about the same as he was last year, he's going to have enormous leverage to get a big deal. Because my final point with that leverage is, everybody's saying, well, Tannehill isn't playing like Tom Brady. He's not playing like Peyton Manning. He's not playing like Drew Brees yet. I'm like, well, yeah, he's not playing like those guys are right now. But, what are your options? That's what I get so tired of people that are ripping on it. They're like, oh, I can't believe they're doing it with that Tannehill. And I'm thinking, well, if they don't do that, then what's the option? You look at teams around the league right now, like the Jets, like the Bills, and a whole bunch of other teams. They would love to have Ryan Tannehill right now because it's so hard to get a good quarterback. Even if Ryan Tannehill isn't the next Dan Marino or the next Peyton Manning, if he's like just a top-end quarterback, let's say he's like the 10th best quarterback in the league, that's so hard to get your hands on anyway. If Brian Tannehill's gone, what would have been the Miami Dolphins' options? Their best one probably would have been to keep Matt Moore. Look at what the Jets are right now trying to decide whether to start Ryan Fitzpatrick or Geno Smith. And so we've been through all those years of A.J. Feely and Chad Henne, and you got to have a stable quarterback to compete in this league. So, that's always going to be my answer to people that are ripping on extending Ryan Tannehill is like, as opposed to what? Hope you get a high first-round pick and hope that guy pans out? That's really your only other alternative to signing him to an extension.
Exactly, and it's such a fatal flaw for Dolphins fans to keep looking for the next Dan Marino. I don't know if the sport's ever going to see another guy like him. So, but fans, I know that there are fans out there who think that Dan could still play, which is incredibly ridiculous. And the other point you just made, and I couldn't agree more, is that you always hear these people, Tannehill's not that good, he's overrated, deep ball sucks, blah, blah, blah. What else are you going to do at the position going forward? You don't have some sort of like Felix the Cat quarterback laboratory where you can create these guys. It doesn't exist. It's so hard to find a franchise quarterback. If it was so easy to find one, everyone would have one. There are haves and have-nots in the league, and it basically comes down to who's got the right guy under center. And the other thing I just want to mention quickly, I said this on Twitter earlier this week. I went to a wedding a couple of weeks ago in Wisconsin, so I was just absolutely surrounded by Packers fans. And they knew I was a Dolphins fan, and they asked me about Ryan Tannehill, and they were like, "Yeah, he seems like really good. We were really impressed by him in that game last October. He was incredible." He's like, "You must have been just over the moon to have this guy." And I was like, "Yeah, you'd be surprised. There are a lot of Dolphins fans who actually don't like him, and people in the media who think he sucks and try to spread the message as much." And these people were just absolutely flabbergasted. I mean, and befuddled. How they looked at me like that guy could start for half the league. And I agree, and that's why he's getting paid like a franchise quarterback. It's a gamble, but it's kind of also like hedging your bets in that if he never really gets better than what he is now, do you think he could still make the playoffs with him? I think they could, given what they've put around him. But if he comes into this season and he just puts up a monstrous campaign with Devontae Parker and company, then you look stupid for not locking him up before, because now he's bet on himself, and now he is going to get paid. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like exactly. You have to look at it like that. Who are the other guys out there? Are Andrew Luck and Russell Wilson? They're gonna get paid. They won. Blah 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 blah. But it really is a matter of the only people in the league, the only people out there who don't like Ryan Tannehill are the fans of the team that Ryan Tannehill plays for. You ask a Buffalo Bills fan, they don't have a quarterback yet, but they will tell you that they love Ryan Tannehill. They wish they had Ryan Tannehill. That's one team. A Seahawks fan said, and they have Russell Wilson. They have their quarterback. They're good. And they said that they really like Ryan Tannehill. So they have no reason to say otherwise because they have their quarterback, Russell Wilson. There was no, Russell Wilson's better than Tannehill. It's like, well, okay, that's your opinion. But they were saying, no, we like Ryan Tannehill. You just brought up the Packers fans. They have freaking Aaron Rodgers, and they're just saying that they like Ryan Tannehill and what they see in Tannehill. So you have to – is it really just the media, or is it that we are so – is it fans that we're so hungry for that Dan Marino guy? Marino had the fastest release ever in history. He could throw a bomb out there in Nowheresville, and Clayton or / Duper would go up and get it, and they'd throw touchdowns. Is it really the media, or is it really just a matter of we're so hungry for that Marino super big play guy that anybody who can't pull that off just isn't substantial enough?
I think that the media feeds a certain contingent within the fan base for sure, because like you said, no one outside of of South Florida or really outside of the Miami Dolphins fan base has too much of a bad thing to say about Ryan Tannehill. But, I mean, then you get people, and it's a great point. I've thought about this. Like, why do certain people hate him so much? I mean, the thing is, like, I mean, you think that they traded up to number 2 in that draft to get him. Imagine if we had taken Robert Griffin. Would people be supporting Robert Griffin, like, to the end, the way that they refuse to support Ryan Tannehill? Is it just a case that they didn't get the guy they wanted in that draft? Because I'm fairly certain that the Dolphins played that draft, played the first round of that draft perfectly. Sitting at 8, refusing to trade up, getting their guy, not giving up the King's ransom that Washington gave up. They're still paying for it. They just enjoyed their first round pick since that trade this year. So I don't understand it. I'll never be able to understand just what people have against the fact that the Dolphins might have their next great quarterback. And if you think he's going to be like Dan Marino, it's not going to work. It's just you're not going to see another guy come along like that. Because, I mean, Dan Marino wasn't even that good at reading the game. There's that whole story out there about when Bill Walsh wanted to pick his brain because he was so blown away by his talent. He was like, what does the football field look like to you? What do you see out there? And Dan Marino just looked at him. He's like, I just look for the open guy. To Bill Walsh, which is a mind blower considering the genius that guy was at coaching a football team and an offense in particular. So if you're comparing to Dan Marino, you're always going to be disappointed, and I don't know if you can help those people. So it's just best we move on and just appreciate what we have.
I think a lot of it is fed from the media, and when I say media, I mean local media. I'm not going to mention any names, but we all know who I'm talking about.
I think we already mentioned his name.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, don't worry about it. We're whatever.
So, I mean, you have these narratives from others, and you have narratives from players' wives, and you have narratives from media members, and you have narratives from fans that, you know, Tannehill is this, Tannehill is that, Tannehill is this, and Tannehill is that. And everyone says, well, why do you get so defensive about Ryan Tannehill? Why won't you ever blame him? I don't hide the fact that he has problems. Yes, he struggles with the deep ball. We all know that. But he doesn't struggle as nearly as bad as people think he does. Yes, he struggles in different aspects of the game, but the Dolphins are absolutely doing the right thing by building a team around him and appealing to his strengths. Everyone always said under Tony Sparano, under Dave Wanstead, under Cam Cameron, under Nick Saban, under any coach in any NFL team, fans and media analysts always say coaches need to surround their players with the talent, coaches always need to maximize the talent they have and fit them within their scheme instead of making their scheme fit them. Or it might be the other way around, making their scheme fit them so you're not trying to force a square peg into a round hole. And that's exactly what Joe Philbin has been doing. I mean, you look at the way they revamped their entire receiving core this offseason. You bring in Jarvis Landry, who they drafted last year. You bring in Kenny Stills. Kenny Stills goes deep, but you know what? He also does a lot of slants and a lot of horizontal routes in the middle of the field. Greg Jennings does not a guy who's going to go deep. He is a guy that's going to run slant horizontal routes, and he is a possession receiver. You still have Rashard Matthews, who does not go deep. You have a guy like Dion Sims and Jordan Cameron, who are going to create space in the middle of the field. Am I missing anybody? Oh, Devontae Parker, again, not a guy who's going to run deep. He is going to be your big possession receiver. He's going to run horizontal routes. Bill Lazor's offensive system is based on horizontal passing routes. His system doesn't take a lot of deep shots and only takes them when necessary. Joe Philbin, the Miami Dolphins, Dennis Hickey, and Mike Tannenbaum have created an offense that is going to maximize Ryan Tannehill. It's going to accentuate his strengths. It's going to hide his weaknesses. And that's exactly what people are clamoring for with every single head coach. So now that the Dolphins are doing it, all of a sudden, whoa, why are they doing this? It must be because Ryan Tannehill is not very good. And that kind of makes me mad, and makes me, a bit defensive about it, because the lies that people say out there, the things that people say are lies, and they're not looking at the entire picture. So, that's where I think a lot of that narrative comes from.
The obsession with the deep ball is out of hand. It really is. And I've made this point on my show several times, in that the best deep ball thrower I've seen during my time watching football was Warren Moon. How many Super Bowls did that dude play in? And I loved Warren Moon. I thought he was incredible.
I only remember Warren Moon in like Madden 1990 or something like that.
Okay.
I remember Warren Moon. He threw probably the most beautiful spiral you've ever seen.
I'm
He
way
had
too young to remember
he
that.
had a-
I
he
think
had
Wow.
very good-
let the old people talk about Warren Moon.
Am I
Yeah,
the elder
but-
statesman here?
It's a good point. It's a good point though, because Warren Moon never, was a big Super Bowl winner or anything like that, but he was a very good quarterback. Guys, I've said this before. I'm not even going to judge. I'm not even sure that it's accurate to say Ryan Tannehill has trouble with the deep ball. All I could realistically say is he had trouble connecting with Mike Wallace, who obviously
That's true.
you could tell by the end of the year they had chemistry issues. I don't think they didn't really play enough either. And I can tell you, Mike Wallace is not an easy guy to throw a deep ball to. You assume he's great because he's so fast, but I mean, I've watched him run routes for the last few years real closely, and he never runs at a consistent speed. He's so fast and he takes plays off at times, and he's always running at different speeds because he's able to. And trying to get that timing down as a quarterback would be extremely difficult. I would much rather throw a deep ball to a guy like Devontae Parker, or you think of the Matt Staffords of the world, or Tony Romo as well. It's easy to have a deep ball when you don't have to worry about where the cornerback is. You just have to throw it up in the air to the vicinity of the receiver when you have Des Bryant or A.J. Green or Calvin Johnson, because those guys have such a height advantage. They can go up and get the football. He's going to have that with Devontae Parker, and like I said, let's just wait and see how Tannehill does without Mike Wallace on throwing the deep ball this year.
And that's another thing that I wanted to point out is that having Parker around now is going to make things a lot easier for Tannehill because he can go up and fight for that football. I understand that his going deep is not going to be his forte, but it's not impossible for him to be able to do that now. You look at, and you mentioned, Chad, the whole Mike Wallace aspect of it. Wallace, again, is somebody you need to have a really accurate deep passer with. Maybe Teddy Bridgewater can do that, and you know what? That's fine. That's what Mike Wallace can do. He's not someone who can fight for the football in the air. He's not very good at running routes, and that was Mike Wallace. He didn't fit what Tannehill did. However, the other thing is that, yes, Tannehill has had better connections with his other guys. He's thrown deep balls to Clay, and they've been right on the money. He's thrown balls to Matthews, and they've been dropped in the end zone, and Damian Williams too. I'll probably be bitter about that for a very long time. Like 2 perfect deep passes in the end zone right through their hands. That still hurts to this day. And then you saw Brian Hartline drop a deep ball right through his hands, and you just shake your head at that and say, how can you possibly blame that on Ryan Tannehill? It went right to where it needed to go. But saying that, it does let me bring up this point, and I'm going to ask you guys this. Does it feel like at times that when Tannehill goes deep, he's not just throwing it out there, it looks like he's kind of aiming it? Because I've heard a lot of people say that when you aim a deep ball, it kind of turns out to not do so well.
Yes. Go ahead.
No, I disagree that he's aiming at Lewis. I do think, which he got better last year. What Ryan Tannehill is doing is, it's you just got to realize it takes time for quarterbacks to recognize a defense. And so what he was doing wrong more than anything, in my opinion, with Mike Wallace was he was holding the ball too long because he was wanting to visually see Mike Wallace was open before he threw it. And you just got to realize in the NFL, teams are very good at disguising coverages, and you're trying to get a feel for where the safety really is at on the play. And Mike Wallace, again, is so fast that when he was going, that Tannehill was just getting the – it wasn't like it was an issue that he has arm strength issue. I can tell you right now, Ryan Tannehill has a way better arm than most of the quarterbacks the Dolphins have had in years. It's just if you have the ball come out late, Wallace would typically be too far down the field. That's why you would see an underthrow, which people would typically say, oh, he threw the ball. He didn't have enough arm to get the ball there. And it's like, no, he threw the ball too late, and Mike Wallace was already down the field before the ball was catching up to him. So that's the way I would look at that. Not that he's like trying to pinpoint accurately put it in. He was just holding the ball for that, half a second too long before he got it out.
Keith, are you speaking Martian?
I don't believe so.
I'm gonna mute him
What's
first.
that sound?
I muted Keith for a second so we have some feedback going. What I was gonna say is, I think Tannehill looks a little timid and like he's aiming on the deep balls because, I mean, he's human. He hears, as much as he says he doesn't listen to all the criticism, I'm sure he hears the criticism. I'm sure the coaches got on him in the film room. I'm sure players get on him in the locker room and so forth and say, hey, let's work on our deep ball. Let's get our deep ball going. All the reporters are asking him about it every time they see him. So, of course, it's going to get in his head. So when that time comes in the game, obviously he's thinking about it, and that might, put a little more pressure on him. I think the fact that he's going to have an offense where he doesn't really need to necessarily rely on the deep ball and feel like he needs to throw the deep ball is going to do wonders for him, and I think we're really going to see him explode on the scene in year 4.
I don't know, Matt. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know if I like what you just said, and it sounds like because you basically said that Tannehill does not have any sort of mental toughness, that he actually gets bothered by all the talk. And I understand, like, from the human standpoint, but it's like you're suggesting that because people are getting on him because of his deep ball, that it's affecting everything else that he does. And I don't think Tannehill honestly cares about that much of it.
He might. I mean, I think he was getting more pressure within the locker room than you realize, especially from Mike Wallace and Brandon Gibson. I think they were almost using the form of like peer pressure, to trying to and selfishly wanting more stats, not even caring about the record of the Dolphins. Like Mike Wallace just wanted to be the league leader in touchdowns and passes. I don't think he could have cared less if Miami was actually winning. And so I think he was trying to put pressure on Tannehill to throw more deep balls to him, and that was just kind of like spiraling up on itself. And, the deep ball is a low percentage pass anyway. You just got to keep that in mind. And my question would be is how many bad passes did you see Ryan Tannehill throw? I'm not talking about where he didn't connect on a deep ball. I'm talking about where he misread a coverage, threw it into coverage, or did not see a defender in the area and threw a ball that got picked off. That's the thing that young quarterbacks struggle with is the speed of the game and being able to read defenses. And in my opinion, last year, Tannehill looked much more comfortable. And keeping in mind, he never really has had what I would call a good offensive line. And so you're having to read those defenses, have pass rush on you. To me, it's just common sense to think he's going to get better when they get the line better. They have better receivers in there this year. Was it wrong? Am I wrong here? But what, like midway through the season last year, wasn't Miami first or second in the league in drops? I know they were high, without a doubt. And so you take away some of those drops and you improve your protection a little bit. I mean, think of that. Ryan Tannehill's never even had a good offensive line and a wide receiver core that wasn't high in the league in drops. You just change those two factors and it'll drastically change what kind of a quarterback he appears to be.
Keith, you there?
I'm back.
Yeah. Okay. Chime in.
I don't know if I can really contribute anything past that. You look at the receiver core now, and I get the impression that they had a mold in place with guys like Jarvis Landry, guys who fight for the football, who are willing to do the dirty work underneath, that as far as I can tell, abstain from the diva behavior, and they went and got a lot of these guys who are more of the hard-nosed types, or hard-nosed type, I should say. So, I mean, I like the position they put him in, and now you look at the offensive line and hope that they continue to bring that along. I mean, you're still looking for that contingency plan at left tackle, I think. I mean, I like Brandon Albert. He was outstanding for the Dolphins last year when he was healthy. I love the right side of the line right now. The left side, I like what we have at left tackle. I'm not as crazy right now about left guard. I mean, that's something that, check back with me a couple weeks into the season. We could all feel different about it at that point.
Yeah, it depends on who's playing. If it's Dallas Thomas, we're all going to unanimously just be mad about it.
Yeah, so you just hope that comes along, because the amount of sacks he's taken, and I love when there's an argument out there that most of the sacks he's taken are his fault, and that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you can look, and it's a small fraction of the hits and the sacks he's taken have actually been the result of something he did wrong. So, if you want to put all that on him, then I don't even understand having the conversation, because that's just not a rational view of what's going on the football field.
Yeah, I agree. And let's transition. We're still going to be talking about Tannehill to an extent, but we're going to kind of move into a different different kind of lens. It recently, the Colts punter Pat McAfee pulled out a tweet that basically said that the 23-25 record can net you $96 million. So Andrew Luck must be getting ready to buy the team. So whether you consider that a not so subtle jab at Ryan Tannehill, or whether he's basically coming out in support of his quarterback Andrew Luck, it didn't come off right to a lot of people, and we all know Pat McAfee at this point is somewhat of a celebrity punter. He tweets things and he gets himself into trouble with his mouth, and it's like, you're a punter. What business do you have talking about how much money a quarterback makes? So I'm not going to disagree with his overall point, is that Luck's going to make a lot more money than Tannehill will, and obviously it's because it's result-oriented and stuff like that. But I just look at it like this. Andrew Luck has had excellent results when in his competition is average to below average. You look at the division he's in, and I brought this up a while back, a long time ago, and I just have to do it again right now because it's apropos. Who is in his division right now? The Tennessee Titans, who right now are hoping that Marcus Mariota turns out to be their next franchise quarterback, 1 year removed from drafting Zach Mettenberger, so Mettenberger's already out the door. The Jacksonville Jaguars with Blake Bortles, who they're still the Jaguars, and they really can't seem to catch a break because now Dante Fowler Jr. is out for the season right after they drafted him. So no luck for the Jaguars. They're getting ready to fail all over again. And the Houston Texans, they might have the best shot of anybody to even give any sort of contention to Andrew Luck and the Colts, because they have J.J. Watt on one side, they got Clowney on the other, and they have Vince Wilfork in the middle now. So they have a really good defensive line, but again, there's no quarterback there. Who's their quarterback? I honestly don't even know what the name is. Tom Savage, is it Tom Savage now? Or oh no, wait, they brought in Brian Hoyer and Ryan Mallett. So, okay, yeah, good for you, but you're not going to beat Andrew Luck and the Colts because Andrew Luck is a really good quarterback. So automatically, that's like 6-0. So you're going to play 6 games against your division rivals. Those are going to be all wins for you. And after that, you only need to beat like 5 of your other opponents. How hard can that be? Why is it that when Andrew Luck gets into the playoffs, suddenly everything starts going wrong? Because the competition just got a lot tougher. Luck has never, ever put together a very good campaign against the New England Patriots. They've met in the playoffs a couple of times now, and Luck has managed to look like a fool. So I agree that Luck's going to get more money, and he probably should get more money because he's a better quarterback overall. But I don't like the whole idea of, because Luck has made it to the playoffs every year of his career, that he should be getting more money. Why did he get to the playoffs? It's a free trip every year.
Is Pat McAfee the one who went skinny dipping and got arrested?
Is it him? I don't know.
He's a dunce. No, I don't really care what he thinks. But, I mean, the thing about Andrew Luck and how much money he's going to make, and you compare it to Tannehill, if you're the Dolphins, you just sit back and laugh at that, because the Colts can go ahead and pay Andrew Luck $11 billion or whatever kind of incredible contract he is going to receive, and he is a fantastic quarterback. But the Dolphins, like I said, hedged their bets on this one, tried to go ahead and get a hold of Tannehill now. They perceive who will be worth that $96 million somewhere in there right now, and could be worth a lot more when this season is over. So if that actually happens, and the Dolphins are paying Ryan Tannehill less than Andy Dalton to do some really special things on the football field, then I mean, I don't know who's making fun of whom at that point, but I do know that Pat McAfee should probably stay away from Twitter.
That's good, yeah. He's a moron. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, he just stirring the pot. I'm not going to take anything away from Andrew Luck. He's a very good quarterback, and more than likely he's going to be, in 2 or 3 years, he'll be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league. I think Tannehill has a very reasonable chance to be there with him. When you look through 2 or 3 years down the road here, and suddenly like Peyton Manning's gone, Drew Brees is probably going to be gone or real close to it. Tom Brady, there's a pretty good chance he's going to be gone or real close to it. You can take away all the guys that are the top guys, other than like Aaron Rodgers. Who are your quarterbacks going to be in the league that the teams have the good ones? And I don't see teams that are a lot better positioned than Miami right now with Tannehill to maybe have a top 5 quarterback. So, and they're paying him more like top third of the league money. As you pointed out early on in the talk, Lewis, that's the going rate for a good quarterback. They're not paying him like he's the best quarterback in the league. They're playing him like he's a quarterback that's going to be in the top third of the league, and that's exactly where he's at right now. And so I agree that I think that who's getting laughed at is, you know what? I think there's a little bit of, I don't know if jealousy is the right word, but, it's one of those things where, hey, we've got our guy locked up now. We got him through 2020. We know exactly what it's going to cost. We have that contract in place, so we can move on and start addressing other areas of our team. And the Colts don't have that. They don't know how much money is Andrew Luck going to demand. I would imagine he's going to expect to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. When his contract's up and they got to pay him the money, that's I'm sure what he's thinking. And so the Colts have to live with their personnel decisions of that. How much cap space do we have to keep aside to get Andrew Luck under contract? And what if Andrew Luck refuses to negotiate the deal out? Do they got a franchise tag? They're in that scenario right now. And so I think deep down, when you feel like you've got the guy, that's what you want as a fan and as an owner and even as other players is I'm sure they want Andrew Luck locked up and they want to know that they've got him through 2020 and exactly what that contract is. And they have no idea right now what that's going to be.
Well, the two guys that I've seen mentioned alongside Andrew Luck in the wake of this Ryan Tannehill contract is Cam Newton and
Russell Wilson.
I was going to say Russell Wilson's the other one. So what happens to Russell Wilson when his entire defense migrates to Atlanta?
Exactly.
Because it sounds like that is in the cards. Well, there's so many jokes coming up here right now. But Bruce Irvin wants to move on. There's a couple of other guys who have already pledged allegiance to Dan Quinn in Atlanta. So what happens at that point? Is he still getting into the playoffs? Are you winning the NFC West every year? Are you in the NFC Championship game every year? And this is after you've already paid him. Is this something that Seattle takes into account when they're getting ready to offer him the Godfather type contract that a lot of people assume that he's gonna seize?
And that's the thing, Keith. That's always been my biggest problem with people telling me about QB wins and losses and playing the results. Russell Wilson does not make it to the Super Bowl 2 years in a row if his defense is not the top defense in the league. They're not a good defense. They're not even a great defense. They are the best defense in the NFL, and that has been their calling card for the last few years now, and that is why they have made it to the Super Bowl. People want to say Ryan Tannehill switched places, and I honestly believe that Russell Wilson still the results would be pretty much the same. Maybe Wilson's a little bit better, just by this little amount that you can't even see. But again, who does Russell Wilson have? Russell Wilson has Marshawn Lynch, one of the best running backs in the league, and somebody he can give the ball to and run that 1 yard to win the Super Bowl. Good job, Pete Carroll. But that's neither here nor there. And admittedly, his weapons aren't as good as far as receivers and tight ends go as maybe Tannehill had. But again, you have that defense that you know you can count on without even thinking about it. You send out the Legion of Boom out there, and they're going to go do their job. That's not even an issue. You give the ball to Marshawn Lynch. You know he's going to get yards. That's why that's why everybody wants a guy like Marshawn Lynch, the dude with tree trunks for legs who can run over people. So it becomes a matter of why is it that playing the results is so popular? You're saying that your quarterback is the reason you won? You better look again before you pay that huge amount of money to whoever your quarterback is. Andrew Luck has made it to the playoffs 3 years in a row because Andrew Luck has had a free trip to the playoffs 3 years in a row. It's not hard to win the division when the teams in your division are the Jaguars, the Titans, and the Texans. It's not that difficult. And for Russell Wilson, who's going to beat that defense, really? I would love to have a defense like that. If we had that kind of a defense, we'd be going to the Super Bowl every year too.
Honestly, Lewis, I don't even care because when I talk about the topic, I don't want to take anything away from Russell Wilson or Andrew Luck or Cam Newton. I mean, they're good quarterbacks and they've done some really special things in the NFL. And if any of those three were the Dolphins quarterbacks, I'd be excited to have those guys too. They're good quarterbacks. The question I like to throw out there is, again, what are your alternatives? And Ryan Tannehill he's a pretty solid quarterback, and I'm glad they got him locked up. And whether people want to argue whether he's better than Russell Wilson or Andrew Luck or Cam Newton, argue all you want, but the reality is all three of those quarterbacks are unattainable. There's no way in the world the Dolphins could get a hold of Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, or Andrew Luck unless something crazy happened. Those teams are not going to cut those guys. They're going to want an absolute fortune in trade for those guys. And so you just got to realize your job from a personnel standpoint is to put the best possible team on the field. And for what they're paying Tannehill, although it seems like a lot now, I don't see where there is any other alternative that would have been an obvious upgrade, because I can't name one quarterback that I would say realistically is going to be available that'll be in his prime that's better than Ryan Tannehill. All you can theoretically say is there's going to be a quarterback in college that Miami might have a chance to get in a draft, which would probably mean they're going to have to do pretty bad to get that quarterback. So to me, it's a no-brainer.
Well, look at the quarterback drafts that we've had since 2012. They really haven't been very good. I mean,
no, they haven't. And in the free agent side of it, you tell me a quarterback other than the unusual case with Peyton Manning, who, granted, Peyton Manning's still a good quarterback, but he's well past his prime. I think anybody, that's watched the game realizes that case. So, it is what it is.
Peyton's surviving on his brain, not his arm.
I think Peyton should have. I mean, I don't want to second guess any decisions, and I'm not really a big fan of playing hindsight because there's always so many variables and nuances that affect everything that happens in sports. But I really think that Peyton would have been wise to either go south or stay indoors. I think after spending the majority of his career in Indianapolis, I thought it was strange that he decided to go play outdoors in Colorado. I thought that was a weird transition. And I know that, I mean, he's had some incredible seasons there, but I think that just in a way for him to finish out his career, I think he would have been a lot more comfortable and perhaps maybe more viable long term if he had stayed indoors. I mean, that's neither here nor there. But I mean, the point I was going to make is these drafts that have, 2013, 14, and 15. I mean, you can't judge 15 yet, but I mean, who's the best quarterback to come out of it?
Andrew Luck.
I mean, since.
Oh, since then.
You're probably looking at Jacksonville.
Bortles?
Yeah. I think Blake
Bridgewater. Bridgewater would probably be it.
I would put Bridgewater probably just above Bortles in terms. Although Teddy Bridgewater's frame worries me, I think that's going to be. I'm not suggesting he's going to be like a Robert Griffin injury case, but I do think he's a little frail in the lower body, so that worries me.
Right, but if you're talking about the best quarterback since, I guess that would have to be Bridgewater, because Bortles was not impressive. Maybe Derek Carr in a couple of years, and maybe Jameis Winston pans out, but it's like, other than that, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. There's not a whole lot out there.
Yeah, I mean, who are you? You're not going to take any of those guys over Ryan Tannehill. I mean, I hope you're not, at least. So I think that people need to be a little bit more appreciative of what they have in-house right now, because it's been such a tendency for a lot of people in this fan base to always think like the next best guy is out there, you just got to find him. And that attitude has remained in place, shockingly, past 2012 in the spring when they drafted Ryan Tannehill. You'd think that they'd perhaps take a look at what they have on the roster and think like, okay, this is our guy. You still think see a lot of people go out there and say, I think there's someone else out there. I mean, that's just not true. And I thought, one other thing I want to mention I thought was kind of messed up was when Tennessee drafted Mariota. And if you take a quarterback number 2 overall, that should be something exciting. I mean, don't you think? Isn't that something that Dolphins fans were craving for a really long time? Just to have that high pick and to just take like a big name quarterback. And instead Tennessee was just kind of like, I mean, I think we can fit him into Ken Whisenhunt's offense. We're not sure. And I just thought it really, really detracted from something that should have been a great moment. And that they very well could have landed their guy. I know a lot of people tout Zach Mettenberger. I was never really a big fan of his when he was at LSU. I mean, I understand that the size is there, the arm is there, but I just never really saw anything past that. I think that Mariota could be a good guy for them, and I think it's weird that they almost make it seem like they're prepared to fit that square peg in a round hole.
Well, I think part of the issue that they're struggling with, Keith, is they've had, they had Jake Locker there, and he was a number 1 draft pick who didn't really ever pan out. And then they have Mecklenburg, and he hadn't really panned out. And so I think you realize, unless you're a guy like Andrew Luck, for example, that's like a once in like every 5 years or even a decade quarterback who's coming out NFL ready. I mean, you just got to realize you're kind of sucking it up, and you might have to take a beating for 1 to 2 seasons to get your quarterback up to the higher levels. Exactly what you're talking about, Lewis. That's exactly what Jacksonville and Oakland are doing right now. Is they went through a year with a rookie quarterback, and we've been through a year with the rookie quarterback, and so you've got to just look at the time involved in it, and so that's where Tennessee's at. It's like, here we go again, another 2 years of having to go through trying to get a quarterback up to speed.
I think the writing was on the wall with Jake Locker, though, because you remember if he had come out in 2010, he was expected to be a number 1 pick. He had when he was at University of Washington, you saw all this hype about him, incredibly strong arm. He supposedly ran a 4.3, which I think when he got to the combine, I think he was a 4.5 guy. But the writing was on the wall. A lot of people questioned his enthusiasm for the game, his enjoyment, his approach to the game at that point. So, if Tennessee feels burned by that, then they should really look squarely at their scouting department.
But I would say this, guys. I think the Tennessee Titans have become a perfect example of the mindset of the NFL fan base. They wanted their guy right away. And when Mettenberger didn't take over right away, they gave up on him. They didn't even give Mettenberger really a chance to compete or develop. They just said, "Oh, you didn't become a star, so we're just going to move on from you." I didn't like them drafting Mariota simply because you drafted a quarterback to supposedly be the guy 1 year before, with the mindset I thought that you were going to try and develop him. 1 year later, you're drafting Marcus Mariota. And all I can think is, what? You literally just drafted a guy last year, going to develop him to be your guy, and you've already given up on him? That is the mentality that people have had with Ryan Tannehill for the past 3 years, is that they don't want to let him develop. They just want their guy to show up right now. Are people I'm wondering now, if Jameis Winston does not become a superstar right away, are people in Tampa Bay going to give up on him? I'm starting to wonder now.
Of course. That microscope is going to be awfully narrow, and it's only on him. A couple of things I want to mention or touch upon that you just brought up. I think number one is the fact that where Mettenberger was drafted, I don't know if you're necessarily saying he's going to be your guy. I understand that he slipped because of the injury late in the process for him, but I don't think that that's a colossal risk where you're taking him to say, like, okay, he has to be our guy. And though I don't disagree that there's a win now, judge now mentality in the NFL, to where, we're already talking about, who won the NFL draft this year, which seems ridiculous because none of these guys have played yet. The other thing, there's an old adage that you don't pass on a franchise quarterback unless you're absolutely certain that you already have one on the roster. So that part of it I kind of understand. I wanted to see Tennessee trade out of that spot. I wanted to see Mariota, because I've always thought the Titans are kind of boring, and I'd like to see Mariota go to a place. I was hoping Chicago was going to trade up for him. I live here. I think it would have been pretty entertaining to see Mariota play in Chicago, because I think that he would be better than Jay Cutler. I think it's weird. I know it's weird to compare a rookie with a guy who's been in the league for close to 10 years now. But I don't disagree with you in that it's just a immediate gratification mentality with quarterbacks. If they're not good right off the bat, they suck. That's what a lot of people feel like, and I couldn't disagree more. I know a lot of the great ones did pick it up quickly. Some others hung around for a little bit. I mean, look at San Diego. San Diego turned its back on Drew Brees, and a lot of people think that Drew Brees would have been outstanding for the Dolphins. I think getting together with Sean Payton was ultimately what really got him into that second win in his career that proved to be an incredibly fruitful one for him. I mean, can you imagine him doing that for the Dolphins and Nick Saban? I cannot.
Well, it wouldn't have been bad, but I don't know if he would have become that elite guy.
But everyone looks at it and thinks that it would have been like that. Like you'd have that New Orleans offense in Miami, which is ridiculous. I mean, who was the best quarterback or the best receiver he would have had at that point was Chris Chambers. And I love Chris Chambers, but Chris Chambers dropped a lot of passes. So, but I mean, you look at this hindsight, you look at the immediate gratification. I couldn't agree more that it's a ridiculous trend in the NFL right now. And I mean, it's rampant.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we're going to switch. We've been talking quarterbacks for an hour now. Do you realize that? That's incredible. All right, we're going to switch real quick. We're going to switch over to the defensive side of the ball. OTAs are coming up, and people are starting to question, will Ndamukong Suh be there? But I have a better question. Does it even matter if he's going to be there? In Detroit, he did pretty much the same thing, so I don't understand the big deal about him doing it the same thing in Miami. And Ndamukong Suh is going to do Ndamukong Suh, and I don't see why it's a big deal that that he doesn't show up for OTAs or he doesn't show up for the voluntary workouts. So my question to you would be, do you think it's a big deal? Do you think he should show up just because, or do we let Ndamukong Suh be Ndamukong Suh?
Here's the thing about Suh. He's one of the best defensive players in the league, top three definitely. You know, you can say J.J. Watt, Richard Sherman, or someone else of that nature. But in Detroit, he was always on his own, and he always was one of the best defensive players in the entire league. Obviously, you want people there to start forming bonds with their teammates and taking the young guys under their wing and everything else. But if Suh has this routine that's been working for him for the past so many years, that allowed him to get this monster contract, that allowed him to become one of the biggest defensive players in the NFL, why in the world would he stop now just because he's on a new team? For Suh, the more important thing is him getting his body in tip-top shape. His important thing right now is not figuring out how to get players under his wings, and quite frankly, if the Dolphins drafted someone with the anticipation that Suh would have to be their babysitter, that's not his problem. That's their problem. They did that in the first place. So I have no problem. I mean, obviously, yeah, I would love to see him there. But in the end, it really doesn't make a huge difference. He's going to come. He's going to have plenty of time to bond with his teammates during training camp and mandatory mini camp and all of that good stuff. I have no problem with it because he's off doing his thing. He's going to be one of the best defensive players in the league this year. He has been since he's been in the NFL, and that's all because of the way he has worked out during the offseason with his own personal private trainers and whatnot.
One thing you can't question is his commitment to the game. I mean, he loves the game. The work ethic he has is incredible. So, I mean, if he does it on his own, that doesn't bother me because one way or another, you're going to get the results. It's not like he's off doing non-football things and he's just not interested in anything that involves preparing for the upcoming season. So, I mean, how he chooses to train and work out and prepare for what's ahead this season, that just doesn't bother me.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me either, guys. If he were a rookie, I'd be a little more concerned, but he's a veteran, and I'll probably take some heat over this, but my opinion in football is defensive tackles is probably one of the easiest positions to play from a complexity standpoint. And a veteran like Ndamukong Suh, it's not like he's going to struggle to come in and try to figure out what he's supposed to be doing. And as Keith touched on, I don't think he's out screwing around. I think he's going to come in pretty good shape. I think he's an extremely hardcore worker in his physical condition. And so I don't see why it's the media again. You got to make something, something's got to be wrong with this guy.
Chad, I don't think it is because the media kind of jumped on what the fans were worried about. I saw a lot of people who they don't like what the media have to say, but yet they're still saying it and agreeing with it. So I can kind of see it that way. They're worried that because Suh is joining a new team that he should try to ingratiate himself with the new team as much as possible. They're worried that he's not really taking this whole thing seriously like he has to. He's not taking it seriously that he's no longer a Detroit Lion. This is not Detroit. He's in Miami now, and Miami needs to be, I don't know, I guess he needs to acclimate himself to the environment. Not I don't mean for the heat and stuff. I mean for, this is the new locker room. Get yourself in there as much as possible. And they're worried that because he's not doing the OTA thing, that he's making a bad impression by not being there.
Well, I can assure you when the season starts and the first snap and he peels a double team, just like snaps it in half and gets into the backfield and wreaks havoc, there are going to be very people sitting there thinking, oh, but why didn't he do OTAs with the team?
This is true. That's
and being realistic, guys, if you have watched him throughout his career, because I've watched the documentaries on him and I've watched his interviews and stuff, and if you're looking for a player to come in that's going to be a rah-rah, go hang out with the players and have a beer after the game type guy, that's not who he is. He's a very secluded player. He's going to lead by example. He's not coming down to Miami to try to make a bunch of new friends. He's coming down to play defensive tackle at the absolute highest level possible. And that's what people, that's what you're going to get. He's not, a guy that's going to be real big on the social setting. And he never has been throughout his career in college or in the NFL. One of the most reoccurring things that hear people say about him was he was a very quiet guy. He was kind of shy. He was quiet. And so he's just kind of like that quiet beast who doesn't have any trouble motivating himself. He's going to be prepared, and he doesn't need to be high on the social standing in the locker room to get himself up for a game. He's going to be up regardless. That's what I would look at it.
That's right. He goes home and reads books. I mean, that's...
What's a book? I've never heard of a book. What is this thing? I've heard of books on the internet.
Yeah,
he's a different dude. You just got to keep that in mind. This is not his parents. One was Jamaican, and maybe the other guy was from Africa, and he grew up a little different. And I just don't think, it's not that he's a troublemaker or anything like that. It's not that he has trouble necessarily relating players. It's just not what he wants to do. And I've met people like that in my life that. They're just people that would rather be off doing their own thing. They're not bad people. They're high performers that when they work, it's just they're not the kind of people that want to hang out with a bunch of people. They, like you said, maybe he just wants to go home and read at night. He doesn't want to go hang out with a bunch of guys and go partying on South Beach. That's just not his scene, I guess, if that makes sense. But
which is how I prefer it too. Yeah, or like I'm glad he's not doing that. I mean, the last thing you want to see is that your highly paid defensive tackle just threw two guys through a club window or something. I mean, there's none of that. So, I mean, if given the alternative scenarios here, I love the fact that, I mean, he can be as secluded as he wants. If he wants to go ahead and isolate himself, and that might come across as a little weird, but I've never seen anything from him that suggests that he sets anything less than an incredibly professional standard off the field.
Off the field. On the field is another story.
Oh, he's an incredible jerk on the field. But, I mean, isn't that what you want? I mean, he's not out there to make friends. I mean, I guess that plays into his personality. He's not interested in making friends. He's out there to seek and destroy.
That's it. I look at it like, he's a grown-up, and some players in the NFL aren't grown-ups. And so if he shows up to camp in good shape, it doesn't bother me at all. If he shows up this year and he's like 15, 20 pounds heavier than when he signed his contract and he's noticeably carrying a bunch of weight, then I would be, as a coaching staff, saying, guess what? You're going to need to be here next year for OTAs because we can't trust you to keep yourself in shape when you're not here. But I don't see any reason to think he wouldn't be. And if he shows up in shape, he should be fine doing that. That's just any player. As long as you show up ready to play, you're in shape, and that's, how many players go to the OTAs that show up out of shape anyway. So it's really
Moreno.
Yeah, Carlos Dansby, these guys.
Ronnie Brown, did he show up 20 pounds overweight? He showed up at 240 some.
Yeah, so it's if you're that, or if you're a young guy that you're concerned, like especially if you're like a cornerback or a wide receiver, or obviously a quarterback, where you've got a ton to learn with the playbook, and it's going to take a long time for you to get up to speed. Well, you need to be learning as much as possible and getting as many reps as possible in there. But like I said, in Sue's part, he's a defensive tackle. He doesn't have to be concerned with reading a bunch of wide receiver formations and knowing what his responsibility is when the ball's hiked. His job's to rush the passer and stuff his running lanes, and so he doesn't need a lot of prep work to be able to do that. That's just the reality of it.
Yep, I agree with that. And guys, give me some background, because I will readily admit that I was not into the NFL that much for the past few years. It's only been recently that I've jumped into this. Give me the story of Albert Haynesworth, because that's what a lot of people are worried that Sue is going to turn into, a guy we paid big time and he turned into something else.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree it's ridiculous, but I never heard the story totally. So,
do you want me to, or it doesn't really matter.
It's such a ridiculous comparison. I don't even know where to start with that. But he's the poster child of the guy that got the contract, Lewis. He was, I want to say he was on if it was the Oilers, maybe. I don't remember the original team he was on, but he was
Haynesworth?
No. He was on the Titans. He was like a 4-3 defensive tackle.
So he was on that team. He became a free agent, and he had a few years where he was one of the better D tackles in the league, and he got signed by the Redskins, who at that time with Daniel Snyder, that's what they were known for, was throwing the big money at the number one free agents. And so at that time, he was in a situation similar to Sue in that he was probably the most coveted defensive tackle. But coming in, he was a known slacker. I mean, he was a guy that showed up out of shape, and that's exactly what he did with Washington. Is he got this massive deal. He stayed away from doing all the off-season stuff, in my opinion, just because he didn't want to do the work. And he showed up way out of shape, and he was very lackluster. So it'd be like signing Ndamukong Suh, having him just go home and eat McDonald's every day and just show up 30 pounds heavier and not be very good. That's what they're comparing him to. But like I said, if you've watched the background on Sue, I would be absolutely stunned if he showed up out of shape, because he's driven much harder than most players in the league. He's in his own world on how hard he wants to work. So I don't think he's going to show up and be an Albert Haynesworth whatsoever.
No, the thing with Haynesworth is that he's a 4-3 defensive tackle in Tennessee, and when he went to Washington was a 3-4 defense. So immediately, a lot of people draw the parallel of that, because the Dolphins run a hybrid defense. It's similar to, or with Ndamukong Suh coming from a 4-3 defense to this hybrid thing, they think it's the same thing. It's not, because he played in a 3-4 at Nebraska. He played everywhere on that line. He almost won the Big 12 championship game by himself against Texas.
Are we talking about Sue or Haynesworth?
Sue.
Okay.
So the any sort of parallel drawn here is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, and I think that
the money aspect.
When I think of Albert Haynesworth, I think about when he stepped on Andre Giroud's head when his helmet was off, and he gave him the business. That was against the Cow. I think that was one of the first weeks of the 2006 season. It might have been week 1, or somewhere around there. So,
wow.
And this will be somewhat, I apologize in advance, no offense intended to Albert Haynesworth, but if you want to compare the two, go back. I don't know if you maybe find some on YouTube. Look at Albert Haynesworth being interviewed, and then watch Ndamukong Suh being interviewed. And it doesn't take very much to see that Ndamukong Suh is a highly intelligent player. I mean, look at his press conferences. He's a smart guy. This guy was an engineer at Nebraska. I don't know if people realize that, and I don't know if anybody went to school for engineering, but that's not cake. I mean, that's mathematics. It's not easy. And again, no disrespect to Albert Haynesworth, but Ndamukong Suh is a significantly higher level player than he ever was in his whole career.
No offense intended, but offense accepted anyway, right?
Well, if you need to get the book on Albert Haynesworth as a Redskin, I remember that Monday night game against Michael Vick and the Eagles when he, I don't know if he was pancaked one way or another, he ended up on the ground, and he just stayed there while the play went another 10 seconds or so. He just laid there, and it was in the red zone. I don't think you're ever going to see that from Ndamukong Suh.
Oh
So
my
I mean,
gosh.
open and shut. Yeah, you can YouTube. I'm sure that's out on YouTube. YouTube's great for this stuff. You can find all that. You can find him stepping on Andre Giroud's head. You can find him laying down in the red zone while Michael Vick scrambles for 10, 15 seconds and then finally finds the open guy. It's all out there. So I mean, there's no comparison except if you want to talk about the fact that he is now incredibly highly paid.
Wow. Okay, so I think we can safely say that Ndamukong Suh is not going to become the next Albert Hainsworth in any way, shape, or form. So we can move on from that.
Yeah, you can argue that he's overpaid, because he got paid such a massive amount of contract. But
Okay, yeah, but you can argue that with everybody.
No, you can. But I'm still sticking on that line that there's very, very few people in the NFL that are more intimidating. I mean, he's quiet, he's smart, and he's dangerous. And I mean, that's what they brought him in for. I mean, if you wanted a guy that was going to be the face of your franchise, he's not it. That's Ryan Tannehill. I mean, that's the guy that you want on all your cereal boxes. And Ndamukong Suh is one of those players in the NFL that doesn't care what other people think. He's not trying to win a popularity contest, and he's dangerous because he'll go out there and he will hurt you. And you gotta have that in the back of your mind when you're playing him. That's how he plays. He's not a lackluster guy. He's an extremely hard worker, and he is out there to try to dominate you in every way possible on the football field. And so some guys don't like that because he does play a little bit out of control. But I mean, it's easy to not like him if you're playing against him. But I bet you pretty much everybody in the league would rather have him on their team.
I mean, he's the one that we've been looking to send after Tom Brady forever. Ever since Jason Taylor. Why can't we find this guy that we can stick after Tom Brady however many times a game? The one thing that I've always been blown away by Ndamukong Suh's power, strength, and he's incredibly quick out there too. And there's plenty of clips out there of him chasing ball carriers down the field. He doesn't quit. The one thing that really convinced me, or the one thing I thought about, or the first thing I thought about when we signed him, was just you could tell when we played Detroit in November that Mike Pouncey wanted nothing to do with that guy. And Mike Pouncey is an outstanding lineman. And because a while I remember that we were single teaming Ndamukong Suh, and he could tell he was out there just thinking like, this is wrong, this just isn't going to work.
Yeah. Now you said it, Heath. Now we're going to have that guy who can mess with Tom Brady's head. Now we have OV on one side, Wake on the other, Sue in the middle. There's not going to be any safe haven for Tom Brady. That's going to make things a whole lot easier for us to maybe push for the AFC East. We're going to wrap up the show pretty soon. We're going to just talk about this one thing real quick. We're going to be talking about Ndamukong Suh's former and once again current teammate, my boy Louis Delmas, making truly a matter of the fact of the matter is this is a miraculous recovery. Torn ACLs usually take like 9 months to recover from, and from the reports that we're getting from players and his teammates, Delmas is running and cutting like he was never hurt after just 5 months. So I got a tweet on Twitter after the story was posted that we need to be looking out for a possible HGH test for Delmas coming up soon. But I don't know, man. What do you guys think about the sudden recovery? Do you smell anything fishy going on here?
No, that's just pure speculation. It's hard. You don't know. I don't anyway. You don't know the extent of the tear that he had. You don't know how successful the surgery was. And Louis Delmas is a natural athlete, and he's a light guy. And so it doesn't shock me that he's able to run around right now. That's a whole lot different than doing a full speed cut and impact in the NFL. So, to declare him ready that just means he's making a good progress back. Louis Delmas better than anybody, and so I'm talking to you, Louis. But he's a good guy. I'd be pretty surprised if he were using illegal supplements or something like that. It's just, like I said, I'm glad he's making good progress, but you know what? That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be NFL ready on the first game of the season. And I don't know that he has to be. We just want to get him back into the fold because we do need a veteran safety in that mix with Wall Aikens. And I like Michael Thomas, but I don't think he's a solution to be your every down safety all year long. I think he's kind of replaces that Jimmy Wilson role where he can be a decent backup safety. He's a good special teams player, and he can even play some in the slot. So he's very flexible. But it's probably going to be the future. Right now, to me, looks like I think Wall Aikens has all the ability in the world, but you just want a guy like Dumas with him until he's you feel comfortable that he's there.
Yeah, I know Delmas pretty well. I think we talked at the kickoff luncheon, which, by the way, you guys need to, when the email comes in, you guys need to buy some tickets and join me down here in Miami for it. Delmas is a nice guy. He's humble. He knows what he's doing. I guess what people are worried about is that he came back from his injury so fast. He's 4 months ahead of schedule. That's pretty ridiculous. And again, like you said, Chad, we don't know the extent of the injury. We don't know how well the surgery went, but still, 5 months. That's incredible to me. And I'm not going to suspect Delmas of anything fishy, but it is a really fast recovery that he was managing to. He's already, according to the reports, he's not just like running. He's cutting, he's jumping, he's doing everything that he's supposed to be doing for the NFL, and I don't know, man.
I do the wait and see approach. I don't really get too excited about timetables and where they're at in the recoveries. It's you really don't know until the bullets are live. That's what I say. If Louis Dumas is back to 100%, you're not going to know it until the games count. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just that Delmas is obviously the best safety we have besides Rashad Jones, and I guess what people are worried about is that we already had this issue with Dion Jordan. Rashad Jones last year got suspended for stuff, and hey, the way that things are going, I can understand people are worried. It's like, okay, this guy just came back from an ACL injury 4 months ahead of schedule. Is something going on? I guess what we're doing is that we're gun shy of all the different suspensions and all that stuff. And I can understand that. If that's what you're worried about, then yeah. But I don't know. Maybe Delmas really is just a really fast healer. Maybe he knows something we don't.
Yeah, it could be. I don't like to speculate because that's not fair to him. They say, he must be using something because he's back. Because if he is, we'll find out eventually with testing. But he doesn't strike me as somebody that would try that. That's all I would say. He's a humble guy and he does a ton of community-related stuff, and so it doesn't strike me as somebody that would be attempting to use illegal substances or something like that with him.
Yeah, so Delmas is going to be good. I think Delmas will be ready for the season. I'm not worried about him. And him and Jones, and we got Grimes on one side, Jamar Taylor on the other. Then you have your linebackers and, of course, the defensive tackle. And this is something that I spoke about earlier today. The fact that we're going to have Ndamukong Suh and Wake and Vernon and whoever else is going to pair up with Suh. Whoever pairs up with Suh is going to be good by default because whoever stands next to Suh is going to be awesome. So that defensive line keeps everything going. Detroit did not have a fantastic secondary, but they were still a top defense in the league for quite some time, and a lot of it was just because they had Ndamukong Suh wreaking havoc on the middle and making everything for their others. You had Ezekiel Ansah doing the pass rushing on one side. That defensive line made everything function better for everybody else. We don't have to just say it. We can look at an example of what it is that it's going to look like. When it was in Detroit, the not-so-great secondary was part of a defense that was considered one of the top ones, and it's because of the defensive line. Now, we have Ndamukong Suh. We still got Wake. We still got Vernon. We have pretty good linebackers. We got Jelani Jenkins on one side. We got probably Cole Messi in the middle, assuming that Jeff Luck or Zach Vigil or somebody else doesn't take that job. And then you got what will probably be Chris McCain on the other side. So I don't have any problem with that. I think this defense is going to be great. And if you want to talk about the Kevin Coyle aspect, okay, fine. You're worried about Coyle, but overall talent of the defense, not even concerned. I love Jamar Taylor. I think he's a stud, and even if he's not, the Sue factor is going to make things a lot better.
Yeah, of course. I feel pretty good. I mean, the only real question mark in my mind on the team is offensive line right now. There's a lot of they're rolling the dice a lot. You're rolling the dice that you assume Brandon Alberts will be able to return to his Pro Bowl form early enough in the season. You're rolling the dice that Billy Turner is not going to have too much for growing pains. You're rolling the dice that Mike Pouncey's hip is completely back to healthy and he's back to Pro Bowl level. And then you're really rolling the dice if you're going to start Dallas Thomas. So
yeah, no kidding. Oh my God.
The more like question marks you put at a position, then it's just the more likelihood there's going to be some trouble. So if anything that has me concerned, it's our line. I think our defense is good, and I like to think Miami's in position to be a strong playoff contender. But the AFC East is going to be an absolute dogfight. Every team in there has a good defense. There's not a bad defense at all in the AFC East. So it's really going to come down to if Miami's going to be successful is. Did Ryan Tannehill take the step forward? Will these wide receivers be able to execute like we think they will? Because the best way to beat these teams right now in the AFC East is spread the defenses out and score points. Because every team in the AFC East has these elite defensive tackles right now, us included. And the best way to remove those stud tackles from the game is to get up 10 to 14 points and make teams have to really throw the football and beat them throwing the football. And so Miami's, other than Tom Brady and assuming his suspension stands, he's going to be gone for 4 games.
It won't stand, but whatever.
Oh, whatever. But Miami needs to capitalize on having Ryan Tannehill, at quarterback and not having Geno Smith in there right now or Matt Castle or whoever ends up quarterback in Buffalo. Yeah, we need that. That's our clear, distinct advantage over those teams. We need to capitalize on it this year.
Absolutely agreed. All right, I think that wraps things up. We talked a lot about Ryan Tannehill. We talked a lot about stuff that's related to Ryan Tannehill. Thank you, Pat McAfee, for giving us a good talking point. We talked about Ndamukong Suh. We talked about Louis Delmas. And so we talked about my 3 favorite players in the team today, so that makes me a happy camper. And we'll talk to you all next week on the Fin Maniacs Live. Thank you for joining us, and take care, everybody.